This episode of Bright Hearth is brought to you by Backwards Planning Financial with Joe Garrissey, Keepwise Partners, Rooted Pines Homestead, Indigo Sundry Soap Company, Reformed Pottery, A Well-Worn Story, and by our supporters at patreon.com.
Courage is not simply one of the virtues, but the form of every virtue at the testing point, which means at the point of highest reality. A chastity or honesty or mercy which yields to danger will be chaste or honest or merciful only on conditions. Pilate was merciful till it became risky. C.S. Lewis.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Bright Hearth here in our season on truth, goodness, and beauty, where we're talking about households and building households that defend and radiate truth, goodness, and beauty. Before we get into that, though, babe, how are you doing this evening?
Good.
Doing good.
I'm reading the script you gave me.
The script that I gave you. Lexi doesn't like to be boxed in. I can't let her know there's an outline.
Caging me down.
Yeah, she's a free spirit. I have an outline in front of me for an episode.
It's not like it's that I want to please you, and so if I don't feel like I have the right answer, I just feel like I'm a failure in your eyes. That's what it is.
Babe, I believe in you. You're not a failure. I would never give you an outline for an episode now because I know you. I know your soul. I am, we're one flesh, and I understand that it just stresses you out. So, every episode is a surprise. It's a roller coaster. She doesn't know what's happening next. It's like a haunted house ride. She comes around the corner and boom, a new question. Didn't see that coming. And it lets the fresh thoughts just bubble up.
It does.
I love it.
It does.
I absolutely love it. So before we jump in, though, to our topic for this episode, really quickly, just wanted to say, guys, there's still a little bit of time to sign up for our conference coming up June 6th through the 8th here in Ogden. I think we've got more than 700 people coming so far with men, women, and children.
Wow.
It's a great one for families. We've got tons of room, and it's our most affordable conference ever for whole families since we were able to put it at a bigger venue. Building Christian boroughs, we're talking about building thick Christian communities that have really all of the different parts that a community needs. So really hope to meet a bunch of you there. I think we have a code. I'll put it in the description. It's like Bright Hearth or something. It's probably something creative like Bright Hearth, all caps.
I've been thinking about how
10% off.
I'm probably going to meet people that I follow and interact with on Twitter, but I don't know their real name, their handle.
Yes.
But I don't know if you do this. I think I mostly make up people's handle in my head just based on the first two letters, and then I fill the rest in.
So you're like, are you this handle on Twitter? And they're like, no.
I've been really worried that I'm...
Good for you, babe.
I've literally been thinking, I need to tell people to, wear a shirt with their... It's not a meme.
Their Twitter handle.
No, their picture.
Their profile picture.
Because the picture I can associate better than the handle because of my brain just fills in the handle.
It's true. Every conference I go to, I'm like, hey, are you Puritan Emperor Inquisitor _ Dragon Fighter? And they're like, yes, that is me. Thank you for noticing. So, man, great. Yeah, that's all I got, guys. Come to the conference. We're hoping to meet a bunch of you. That's my favorite part of conferences. Talks are great. We got great speakers, but my favorite part is just getting to hang out with folks who are like-minded from across the country. So what are we talking about in this episode anyway, babe?
Today we're talking about courage, which falls in the virtue category for the truth, goodness, and virtue season that we're in, right?
Truth, goodness, and beauty.
Yeah, truth, goodness, and beauty. So Brian, what is virtue? What is the virtue of courage? What does it mean to be courageous, and why is it important in building Christian homes?
I do think this is an underrated productive Christian household virtue, because there's a lot of virtues that probably come to mind quicker in the productive Christian household where you're running into them going wrong quick, like a lot. Things like patience or long-suffering or kindness or, there are just many virtues that I think a lot of people, chastity or, maybe people think my husband he's short-tempered, or there's issues of lust, or there's my wife is a naggy lady. She's not nice. She's not warm. She's rude to me, or, these kind of common garden variety complaints can make it so that when you think about the top 3 or 5 or 10 virtues that would make a good, productive Christian household, I do think courage can be downvoted on the list. But as I've thought about it, and even in the course of counseling and pastoring and seeing people make genuine progress in their homes and actually confront their own sins and sins in their home and grow in real tangible ways from homes that were frustrated to homes where there's fruit growing now.
Mm-hmm.
I think courage is one of the most important virtues that is on evidence or on display when there's progress like that. So courage, obviously, I think you guys are aware of what we're talking about: courage or bravery, moral strength, mental strength.
Would you say like resolve kind of is similar?
Yeah, it's very similar, related. It's the ability to look at something and say, there's going to be something that's going to be difficult. It's going to require perseverance. It's going to make me withstand danger. There's going to be fear involved in this, and I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to resolve to do it anyway. And I think when you describe it that way, people can immediately see why, this would be so important to deal with.
Lots of things.
Anything that's going wrong in your home, not just inside the home from you or your wife or your kids, but also outside, extended family issues, church issues, community issues, things at work, things out in the world. Courage is going to be needed for Christians, like thoroughgoingly.
Yeah, I agree.
One passage that comes to mind for me, there's the obvious one where Joshua's charging the people, be strong and very courageous. That's definitely high on the list. But one that's very pithy and quick, and I think as you understand some of the words that Paul uses, it's even more potent, is in 2 Timothy 1:7, where Paul says that God has given us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. That's courage. He's talking about the spirit of not fear, but power and love to face something difficult. And the word he uses for fear there in Greek, if you look at the way that it's used in extra biblical sources, so like not, current other Greek sources in Paul's time, but not in the Bible, it's a word that's often used. It's basically someone who runs away in battle, like somebody who would abandon the fight. And it's a very denigrating term.
So it really is coward.
It is extreme cowardice.
Okay.
Where contrasted with that, when you read through the scriptures and you look at the opposite, that the righteous are bold as a lion, Proverbs 28:1, and when the Spirit is at work in His people, in Acts 4, for example, there's boldness in the people. They preach boldly. It says in Acts 4:31. Courage is this virtue that is going to be able to look fear in the eye and say, look at hard things in the eye and say, I'm going to go and face this. I'm not going to run away. I'm not going to shrink back. I'm not going to be overwhelmed by this. I'm going to, buck up. I'm going to go do the hard thing.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because in the context of that verse is Paul is reminding him of the ministry, like the duty, the vocation God gave him. So I think that's a really good context for what we're talking about. A lot of these things are duties God has given us that we can't be fearful of them. But part of why we can be confident that God will equip us to not be fearful is because it is actual work that He gave us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's in the heart of our vocations.
Yeah, you're not like calling on God to give you strength for something that He hasn't promised to give you.
Exactly. When we're talking about the types of situations that most commonly we're going to experience fear in and need courage, like we can come up with these very rare events and think, well, it's going to be if a burglar breaks in. Well, you should be bold then. Like, oh, my husband's gone at work, and what if somebody broke in the house? What would I do? And it's happened to our friend, actually. Ben, on my co-host on Haunted Cosmos, Ben and his wife, they had a crazy guy, like, break into their basement, broad daylight, and she was, like, barricading herself with the children in a room with the home defense. I'm not going to give their home defense plan away, but with their weaponry on the phone with the police. They were like, yeah,
good job, Allie.
This crazy guy's been trying to get into people's houses. And good for, like, that's a shield maiden. Great job. Ben obviously rushed home and, pulled the guy to the police car, beat him up a little bit. He didn't really do that. He probably wanted to. But that's probably not the most common sort of situation. No. Far more likely than that, you're going to need courage that's right there in the heart of a vocation. Vocation is from the word vocare. It means calling. So right in the heart of where God has called you centrally to function as a man or as a woman, you're very likely to face your strongest fears or temptations to fear or to shrink back or to fail in resolve. They're in the center. And those peripheral things are important too, but I don't think people connect courage to those central vocations enough. Like, for example, I would say that, sure, a man not being courageous when the burglar breaks in has probably caused a lot of problems over, there have probably been guys that ran away when they should have defended their home or something. But how many homes have been plunged into chaos because a husband will not courageously lead and address problems and love his wife enough to bring real proactive leadership into the home? And how many homes have been, frustrated and really brought to ruin because of a wife who will not face her own problems, but gives way before the flesh? Probably many, many more. Here at Bright Hearth, we love to support Christian family businesses that are doing great work, which is why we're so happy to commend to you A Well-Worn Story. A Well-Worn Story is a sewing studio based in New Glarus, Wisconsin, and they're making handcrafted leather and canvas goods. It's run by a husband and wife team, and they focus on making beautiful products from natural, high-quality materials that only get better with age, telling your unique story. Made in rural America, this Christian family business makes high-quality handcrafted leather and canvas bags, belts, and wallets, and these are heirloom quality, stuff that you can hand down to your next generation. You can order online at www.awellwornstory.com and use the discount code BRIGHTHEARTH, all caps, no spaces, to save 10% on any order. Truth, goodness, and beauty is not only the theme of this season of Bright Hearth, but also the focal point of good, Christ-honoring artwork. At Reformed Pottery, pastor and artist Kyle Horton has a mission to create God-glorifying art with his small family business. Each piece is handcrafted and unique, from mugs featuring biblically inspired art, quotes from Puritans and Reformers, or scenes from stories by great authors such as Tolkien and Lewis, to ornamental pieces to beautify the productive Christian household. You can visit reformedpottery.com, and as a gift to Bright Hearth listeners, receive 10% off your first order with code BRIGHTHEARTH10. That's all caps, BRIGHTHEARTH10, and as always, that link will be for you in the description. Are you tired of all the plastic toys that are cheaply made in China? How about the greenwashing that comes with wooden toys covered in harmful chemicals, yet claiming they're safe for littles because the FDA said so? Well, look no further. At Rooted Pines Homestead, husband and wife, along with their 5 young children, work together as a family economy to create handmade, natural wooden toys and goods that can be passed down to future generations in small batch, organic, and wild-crafted herbal remedies. From using locally sourced wood to coloring toys with real foods and plants, they deliver various types of wooden products that are coated with only 2 ingredients: local beeswax and organic expeller-pressed coconut oil. Talk about food safe. Their family values include being good stewards, making sure that their products are the highest quality and not harmful to families, homes, or our environment. They also teach free herbalism on their YouTube channel for those wanting to take back what New Agers have tried to distort in worshiping creation rather than the Creator. Why support the big companies who knowingly use cheap, toxic ingredients because it's better on their pocket when you can get 10% off your order using code BRIGHTHEARTH10, that's all caps, BRIGHTHEARTH10, to support your brothers and sisters in Christ at Rooted Pines Homestead. Check out the show notes for more details and connect with them on social media. So let's actually start right there and talk about this from the perspective of the woman. Because I think there's a lot here as we start to unravel this, where listeners will see, it's exactly right. That's what we're talking about here. What are some ways that a woman typically within her vocation is going to need courage? What are some of those places where you can either fail in the courage and you needed it, but you did not muster the virtue? Instead, you gave way to fear. What are some of those areas?
Biggest one that comes to mind in today's culture for me is the submission in marriage, honoring and respecting your husband, the marriage aspect of the woman's vocation.
Yeah, that's a great example of a vocation. Like, that's a central vocation to the woman. She's a wife. And as a wife, God says, wives, see that you respect your husband. Submit to your husband as Christ is the head of his church, so the man is the head of his wife. So what are some temptations to fear there, and what would it look like for the wife to give way to that fear? How does this dynamic play out?
Usually controlling and nagging, or maybe being, I don't know what the motivation for this one would be, but it's still connected, is like being too quiet of a wife, maybe because you're fearful of, maybe you're like married to a hot-headed guy that you know you should confront, but you don't know how to because you're so scared that he's going to blow up or something, when really he needs to be confronted somehow, whether it's, a wife or getting elders to help her or something. But I think it can be hard for a woman on both sides to be brave and have to, like you were saying earlier, they're fleshly issues. You're having to put your flesh to death in order to accomplish this. And that's, I think we forget sometimes when fighting sin that it's kind of supposed to feel like crucifixion. Like, that's the whole point.
Yeah.
So, but it can be so much easier to just either ignore it or make excuses. I think that's a big one for women, is making excuses, instead of actually having the resolve to say, no, I'm going to, learn to speak respectfully, or I'm not going to roll my eyes, or I'm not going to make a negative comment when he takes the initiative and makes a decision. Or I think it's okay to acknowledge that given every woman's specific sin in this area, it's going to feel like part of you is dying, because it is. So I just think it's important to acknowledge that. But on the other side of it, eventually is resurrection joy. So
yeah,
you have to just kind of trust that. I think some of it too is women needing to lay down the plans that they have for their marriage and their home and their family, and just trust that God has a better plan, whatever it is. And I think that's like walking in faith in your marriage, is you might not see how it's going to turn out, but if you're obeying if you're obeying today with what you're supposed to be doing, then you really can entrust the rest to the Lord.
Well, yeah, there's an important feature to submission that is easy to overlook. It's important to see it there in those texts where Paul calls
that's
for
what I
it.
pulled up.
And it's that submission is actually almost definitionally, at least at its testing point, is going to come when you don't think that the thing that your husband is asking you to do, or the decision that he's calling for, is possibly the right one. You don't necessarily agree. Like, that's where agreement is when you both agree on everything and you just do what you both think is right. Submission is when a leader in authority says, this is what we're going to do. I've thought about it. This is where we're going to go. And I'm not taking a vote. This is what I'm convinced this is where a home needs to go. And you could see why, when a husband's even doing it right, that could require quite a bit of courage. Well, of course, when he's doing it wrong, or when there's imperfection or sin mixed in, which there almost always is when we're talking about human beings, it makes it even harder. And there's more courage. But even when he does it really well, even when a husband shoulders responsibility well, does his duty, leads his wife meekly and cheerfully and with strength and with humility, it's still difficult when she looks at that and goes, I don't think we should make this move. I don't think we should do this career change. I don't think we should do this decision with the kids. And he says, no, trust me, follow me. This is what's going to be best for our family. I could see how that could require quite a bit of courage, especially the courage to not be a total cow about it. To not be like, I'm going to technically submit,
Oh, I see. Yeah.
but I am going to be as obstinate as I'm going to be like a huge barnyard animal that must be drug around by a lead and call it submission, where it's very begrudging. It's not cheerful. It's not like Sarah's submission where she feared no fearful thing.
Mm-hmm. I've been reading Matthew Henry's book, A Method on Prayer, I think is what it's called. And he pointed out multiple times, specifically in 1 Samuel 18. No, maybe it's 1 Samuel 1, where Hannah is going to the Lord and pouring out her complaints in prayer. She gets up and is no longer sad. And Matthew Henry just makes the point multiple times that if we're going to God regularly with complaints and prayer, that's what's enabling cheerfulness the rest of the time. Like Sarah obviously left her sorrow in her prayer so that she could get up and go be cheerful. And I think that's something that women really overlook is like, have you gone to the Lord with that then? Or are your complaints and your bad attitudes and your negative outlook on the situation spilling over to everybody else because you didn't actually take it where it should have gone first?
Yes.
Because you wanted to watch Netflix too late and not get up and pray about it. And that's for real too, is like, I think if you're really struggling with that, you need to start the morning with that, or else it is going to spill over through the rest of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think submission is definitely one and we could say submission, but we could also broaden that and say within her relationship to her husband, she is going to need courage to cheerfully obey the Lord, pursue her vocation, and courage often comes with trust, where it's like, I'm trusting in two directions at once in this. The wife is trusting her husband, but she's also looking through her husband and trusting the Lord in that. Think about the Israelites going and facing armies in the land of Canaan that were far greater than them. And they're like, well, God told us to go do this. He said he would make them flee. He said 10 of us would put 100 to flight.
Yeah.
And so but now here's the testing point. Like to Lewis's quote from the Screw Tape Letters, courage is the testing point of every virtue. It's when it gets hard that you prove any virtue that you have it or you don't. It's when it required courage to exercise it, to be truthful, or to be, you could look through any, and he gives examples of chastity or different virtues. But I think that's a powerful point that you could broaden that out and just say, generally speaking, the relationship to her husband. Another one that comes to mind, I think, that's pretty obvious would be in childbearing. Everything that comes with that.
Really?
It looked to me, when I was observing it all 6 times, that it was difficult. And actually, it seemed like you were scared at different points.
And actually, that might be the easiest part of parenting is getting them out.
Just getting the baby out. I don't know if I'd call that the easiest part. I can think of at least one part that was a lot easier. And now we're going to get reviews.
What did you just say?
What?
Okay.
With respect to children, child making and rearing, I would say there's one part that's probably easier than many.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I got it.
Okay, anyway. But yeah, childbearing. It looked hard. It looked like you were fearful at different times.
Yes, having a child, making a child. Yeah, this is another really good example where it obviously hurts and is death to self, and you're literally physically giving your body away.
Yeah.
That definitely requires courage, and I think too it's connected to marriage in the sense that, especially as you have more children, you are really entrusting yourself to your husband in a way.
Yes.
After many children that I don't know how to describe it. Like after the first 2 or 3, it just gets like the stakes feel a lot higher.
Yeah, seriously.
I don't know how else to describe it. So
no, like the what ifs.
Yeah.
What if my husband died? What if he was unfaithful? What if there's, what if he gets disabled? What if there's when you have many children.
Yeah. And as you go married longer and you're more and more established, you just kind of start to realize like, I'm really entrusting myself to him in every single way possible that he's going to take care of me in.
Yeah, you're dependent.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing. This is how God
it's
created.
Not bad.
We're supposed to mutually depend upon one another, but it actually does.
But it can
courage.
Feel scary. I mean, I know we've talked about this before. It can feel scary. Like the idea, because my stance is that Christians should not use chemical birth control. So,
Right.
which always means there's a possibility of having a baby. So I think it can be scary after a number for a woman. She literally has to be brave and like understand that my husband will take care of me. He's not like leaving me out. I tell myself this all the time, like, Lexi, you're in the best case scenario to have another baby because I have a husband who's faithful and provides. So, but I could see where women would struggle with that.
Yeah.
And it could be a very anxiety inducing type of a situation.
Absolutely. Because it really is, it's the so you said it was the giving away of yourself, like where you're undertaking this difficult, painful, physically painful thing. But then also it's the eroding of what could be seen as this is the what fear would say is what I'm saying. This isn't reality. But fear can look at it and say, this is a giving away of more and more of me, of my control and my time and my strength and my sleep and my everything. And so there's not going to be anything left for me.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
And of course, that's fear. We know that the real joy and satisfaction in these vocations comes in wholeheartedly doing them. And so that really means that there are going to be greater and thicker and deeper and better joys on the other side of that giving yourself away for the sake of having children, that glories that you couldn't imagine if you never did, right?
Yeah.
If you gave in to the fear.
Yeah.
But the fear is real.
Yes, and I think I don't know any man personally, but I do know there are men out there who would look down upon a woman because of that. But as I'm thinking through this tonight with both marriage and submission and childbearing, God created it so the man is to nourish and care for the wife. Like that's part of his duty.
Yes.
So a husband shouldn't look down upon her if that's where her fear falls. Like, yes, help her out of that, but don't degrade her because of it. God created her to receive that care and nourishment from her husband. And so of course she's going to be concerned. You know?
This is one of the things we're going to talk about, some of the duties of husbands as well in this episode. But this is one of the reasons that I think, one of the reasons I tell husbands often that they need to be somewhat of a wall, like where your wife can run into and you're not going to be knocked over easily. And when I say knocked over, I mean you're not going to be knocked over into annoyance or frustration or anger or any of these things easily. Because one of the temptations for a man when his wife experiences fear and she's coming to him, which she should, she's expressing some of these fears, is for him to take it personally and be like, oh, so you don't think I can provide for you? Or so this is a slight on me. And what he's doing is he instead of being the wall that his wife can run into and he can assure her, no, there's strength here.
And help her out of it.
Let me help you.
Yeah.
Let me be the voice of the courage of the Spirit of God that says, yes, I know that that's real fear, not pretending like those aren't real.
Yes, exactly.
But saying instead, we know that we belong to the Lord and that this is a great blessing and that because of that, we can trust him. And we can trust him even if there's difficulty and even though there will be pain and there will be loss. We know that what we give away in sowing, when we sow our strength and give ourselves away, we receive back far more than we get when we give away. We really can't give away more than the Lord can return. He does. I mean, when he says anybody who gives up lands or family or for my sake will receive back 100-fold. This is the principle that he's talking about.
I'm thinking of the section, I think it's in 2 Corinthians, where he increases what we sow generously. Okay, yeah. Okay, so 2 Corinthians 9:10, he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in every way to be generous in every way, which through us will produce thanksgiving to God. So God is not only supplying you with what you need in order to keep producing, but he is also going to enrich you in every way, not just like one or two ways that you had in mind, but every way.
So that you can be generous.
Yes, generous in every way. Not just generous in the ways you want to be and it's bent towards your personality, but in every way. So I think too, it's like you have to walk in faith and believe that God, if God's calling you to do it, he's going to supply it and bless it.
Yeah.
And increase your harvest of righteousness.
I was reading like a debate between some nerdy reformed types about how many children, like child rearing, quiverful, some of that sort of stuff. And one of them, it struck me, again, thinking about courage. I was like, oh, that was just a fail. That was just fear. You were ruled by fear. This man was talking about how he was like, I'm an accountant. I'm very much aware of finances and budget. And I've looked at how much it costs to raise a child from age 0, from in utero until they're 18. And so my wife and I, we had 2 children, and we felt very comfortable. We felt like we were trusting the Lord, and that was enough. And then we stopped. We intentionally had no more children once we'd had 2, because we knew that's how many I could provide for on my salary. And I looked at that and I was like, you coward. Like, you're just doing the math in the most faithless way possible.
Yeah.
Where you're saying, well, based on exactly what I know today, with no expectation that the Lord might, I don't know, bless you in the future.
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
Provide more than that.
That is what's always funny about that, is it assumes God is not going to. See, it just assumes bad things about the Lord.
And I was just thinking, like, there were people with names that you could have had.
Yeah.
That you would have chosen over that kind of security any day. You would have looked back and given up any measure of budgetary, and I'm not, look, be wise, have a budget, all that. That's great. Be a nerdy accountant type, 100%. The world needs you. We need some of you. The Lord gave you those gifts. Use them to his glory. But don't let, a lot of the time, our areas of strength are where we begin to feel like we no longer need faith in those areas. We know everything. I don't need courage in this area. I have all the information and data. My strength can accomplish this. And the reality is, in all the vocations God calls us to, they are going to require courage if we do them correctly, because they're all going to call us to do things that are beyond our own resources.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what, you can go on and on about it. I think another one, you mentioned earlier that where a woman might need to exercise courage is in things like surrounding her vocation, learning new things, hospitality, like some of these
skills, maybe
Titus
just
2
skills in general. Yeah.
How does courage relate to that?
Because it's hard to learn things. It's hard to be bad at things.
Yeah.
And it's hard to figure out how to get better at things.
It can be kind of embarrassing.
Yeah. So that's why. Especially on top of, like, you have so much other good work to do in addition to trying to expand your capacity in certain ways, that the easier thing to do is just kind of like check out and relax.
What if nobody likes this recipe? I could just keep making the exact same one.
Yeah.
There's safety. There's safety in it.
Yeah, just don't try anything, because then you won't ever, you won't fail. There's no track record of failure, but also there can be no further success if there's never a failure.
Yeah, I think this is going to maybe, I don't know how related this is, but I do think in terms of the marriage bed as well, a wife needs to be courageous in not giving way to like awkwardness and shyness, but nakedness without shame. Like, there really is a courage there. Again, talking about the vocation of womanhood in the home, this is one of the central vocations of marriage. It's one of the central duties of marriage, is like the marriage bed. And it relates. I probably should have brought it up in the childbearing thing we talked about, but I do think that there's something there where we can have a temptation, or she can have a temptation, to basically hold back a part of herself from her husband out of awkwardness or shyness or whatever you call it. I think this is another area where courage is required.
So what advice would you give to a shy wife then? What does she need?
Yes, because the answer isn't to fundamentally become a totally different person. It's but I would say, particularly for a wife that is like, I'm shy, I'm more on the reserved end, that she needs to make sure, that's fine to the world, but she needs to make sure that she's confidently giving herself to her husband, that she's we've talked about this in previous episodes about the marriage bed, that she's saying with herself, with the way that her bearing towards her husband, basically, I want to be your sole source of sexual satisfaction. I want you to delight in me. I'm yours, you're mine. Enjoy what is yours. And there is a certain amount of openness that there can be a real fear there, I think.
Yeah. I think she has to reckon with the fact that she gave away her right to reserve herself in that way too. When her husband promised before a lot of people to take care of her for the rest of her life.
Yeah, in the same way that a husband gave away the right to use every dollar he spends exactly as he wants.
Yeah.
And in the same way that he gave up the right, his body belongs to her, hers belongs to him. There's a fear there. I think that as a husband and wife pursue intimacy together and each seek to please the other, that there is an openness that develops, but there certainly can be a hindrance when there's fear or trepidation. And
I think it's one of the best places where people who, like, I feel like you and I probably pretty regularly have to have awkward conversations with people. But if you're not in a setting like this where it's happening on a weekly basis sometimes, the only other time you might have to have an awkward conversation might be surrounding sex and marriage. So it literally could just be like, you need to learn how to have a hard conversation, and that's it. Like, buck up.
Welcome to awkward conversations.
Yeah, but then it doesn't, the thing is, at least in my experience, it's not awkward after that then. Like, it's not, like, it's better. It's not like something that's awkward and bad. It's awkward for a second, but then it's better. Like, it's helpful, I guess is the word I'm saying.
Yeah, there's a fear of being known. There is a fear that comes with nakedness. And not just physical nakedness, but there's a fear of truly being known and holding no reserve from somebody else. This is why we're actually, like, marriage is the relationship where that sort of dynamic ought to live, and not really other relationships. Like, there's, in other relationships, there's reserve. There are parts of you that's like, no.
Yeah.
But in marriage, this is your one flesh. This is your husband. This is your wife. And so you really do need to courageously confront the part of you that wants to reserve a part of yourself. It's the same thing with childbearing, like where you're trying to think, like, I need to hold this back. Like, this would be too much. This would be too. I need that. I need that. This area reserved. And it's like, well, no, one flesh.
Mm-hmm.
One flesh. Let's talk about husbands. Unless you have any final thoughts.
No,
on
not.
that. Some ways that a man might need to exercise courage. A lot of these are related, but again, they go to his vocation. And so one of the first places that I think of in the requirement of courage for the man is simply in leading his wife. Like, being in his home, the courageous center of active leading presence in the home.
Yeah.
Like, thinking about, I think this is one where guys get hung up all the time. Where a guy has, like, been married for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And he has been given a front row seat to his wife. He knows her better than anybody else in the world. And that means he knows everything that's glorious about her. And he loves her. And he also knows all of the ways where she's easily prone to fall into the rut or a ditch of sin. And if he's been looking at those same his wife falling into those same ditches once a day, once a week, once a month, once a quarter for his whole marriage, and he's never brought it up, and he's never thought, like, I need to talk to my wife about this. God actually gave her to me partly so that I could wash her in the water of the word, present her without blem. Like, I'm supposed to be a part of the sanctifying work of Christ in her life. That's the direct model. So I should probably tell her something like, honey, you're really disrespectful to your parents. I've noticed. Your thoughts. I mean, maybe more tactfully than that. But leading your wife requires, I think, courage. Quite a bit of courage for most men. If you have a young family like me, you work hard every day to ensure you care for your wife and kids. Providing for a young family is challenging with rising costs. It doesn't look like things are going to change in the future. Maybe you've thought, like I have, I wish I'd started investing years ago. My family would be in a better financial position. As they say about trees, the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The second best time is today. Don't let the benefit of time go to waste on your financial planning for retirement or inheritance for your generations. Joe Garrissey with Backwards Planning Financial has been working with us to make the best plan for our family. He's a Christian who works with one of the largest and most trusted financial service companies in the world. He's been helping Lexi and I work towards our financial goals and helps us navigate the complexities of the markets. Whether you have millions in assets or you're just starting to invest, Joe Garrissey can help you reach your goals to grow the kingdom and leave a good legacy for your generations. Visit backwardsplanningfinancial.com. That's backwardsplanningfinancial.com. Or call 615-767-2555 to speak with Joe to prepare for the future. The testimonials presented may not be representative of the experience of other clients and are not a guarantee of future performance or success. Here at Bright Hearth, we're all about helping you not turn into a girl if you're a boy, or into a boy if you're a girl. You know what might be doing that to you? The soap in your shower. And so we are pleased to introduce you to IndigoSundrySoap.com, link in the description, of course, who can provide you with soaps and more without any of the nasty stuff. And because they love you, they're giving you a discount code, guys. So use code, all caps, Bright Hearth for 10% off your whole order. Support this great Christian company and support Bright Hearth Podcast at the same time. Check them out at IndigoSundrySoap.com. And of course, that link is in the description. In the wisdom of the ages, it's written, "Where there is no counsel, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors there is safety." Proverbs 11:14. Now picture this wisdom applied to your small business. Introducing KeepWise Partners, where we blend the power of professional bookkeeping with the biblical virtue of seeking wise counsel.
We understand that running a business is a journey with twists and turns, but fear not. KeepWise is here to be your trusted counsel on the path to financial success as you work to take dominion and build Christendom through your labors.
Just as the scriptures encourage seeking counsel from many, we've assembled a team of skilled advisors who will be your partners in prosperity. We'll meticulously manage your finances, ensuring your business books are tax-ready and allow you to make better business decisions.
What's more, our team isn't just about numbers. We're about wisdom. We'll help you make informed decisions that honor your values as Bible-believing Christians and steer your business toward growth and prosperity, all while keeping your finances in order.
Worried about the cost? Remember, even Proverbs advises prudent planning. KeepWise offers flexible pricing options that'll keep your financial house in order without breaking the bank.
Head to keepwise.partners to get started today.
That's keepwise.partners, and as always, that is in the description below.
Yeah, I'm not a man, so I can't like get in your head and tell you, are you worried that she won't like you anymore? I don't. Like, is it that he just doesn't want to emotionally put up with a crabby lady after that? Like, what is it that is getting in the way of, does that make sense?
100%. I think it's this. When you touch a hot pan, do you want to do it again?
No.
So when you have an experience where the first time you try to bring something up and the person doesn't repent, but they get prickly or defensive or
it gets worse.
Or naggy or rude, or they start cold shouldering you.
Yeah.
Like thinking specifically about a wife. A wife can make this much harder or much easier for a husband by being humble or proud.
Yeah.
So if he's gone that first step and he mustered up the courage and he had the conversation, and the result was like putting your hand on the hot skillet and holding it there for 5 seconds, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. She can't a year later be too surprised if she's like, he hasn't done that again. Like, wow, he's so cowardly. Look, I know I have all this in that he needs to help me with, but I won't, well, give him, cut him a little bit of slack there. But also I would say that's where courage is required for the man, because things get easier when you first step into a situation that requires leadership. It requires leadership because things aren't ordered the way that they ought to be yet. And so you need to come in and you need to take dominion. You need to, exercise godly rule And all of this is humble and tender and kind and all those things, like not a tyrant, but you're exercising rule because rule needs to be exercised or things don't work. Like that's how God made the thing. So if you give up after the first time because it sucked, well, you're never going to be a good leader. You're just going to be a passive
it reminds
leader.
me of that. Is it the proverb that if you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small, basically?
Yes.
Like,
and that's the point.
Yeah.
Is that you have to realize that just like for the woman, she doesn't just have to face the fear of the vocation of, for example, childbearing once. It's like all the way through. There's the fear of, if I open myself to the marriage bed, I could get pregnant. And then there's the, I'm pregnant. This is going to be really hard. And then there's like home birth, hospital birth, all this stuff. Oh, that's going to be really difficult. And then there's the birth itself. And then there's the, the being up and nursing. And then like there's a million difficult things.
She's signing up to a few years of work.
Really difficult work and fear along the way. So a husband has to understand that when he got married, he signed up for the vocation of courage in leading his family.
Yeah, he's helping her navigate and steward those emotions. Not that like bad emotions need to be stewarded, but that doesn't make any sense.
I know what you mean, though. Sometimes what I think about is this: like, how many homes? Again, sometimes 20 years into a marriage,
he's helping her be on the defense against her emotions.
Yes.
I think is what
How many homes, though, think about this, that are already at the stage where there are grandchildren in the home coming over for Christmas. Mm-hmm. And the same old sins in mom and grandma were never corrected by grandpa. And so here they're 30, 40-year-old sins. And they're thick. They got sins put up defenses. Yeah. And they put down roots.
That actually really helps me. There's lots of times where I will just get so frustrated that I'm like, Lexi, you're not going to be putting up with this as a grandma.
Right.
And I think the first time I heard this idea was like either from Becky Pliego or Nancy Wilson of like, if you want to be a gracious older lady, you have to start by being a gracious young lady.
That's right.
You don't get there purely by passage of time. Like, yes, there is some wisdom to just existing longer than other people.
Yeah.
But biblical moral virtues, like we're talking about, don't just pop up without having grown from small seeds. So,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I agree with you.
What this means for a husband, for the new husband, for the 10-year veteran, for the 20-year veteran, like for the whole thing, is that you need to be exercising leadership first in crucifying your own sin, but then tending the things under your care, your wife and your children, your household. If your home is frigid, if everyone's walking on eggshells around mom because she's rude and cold and snappish all the time, that's your thing. You need to go do it. You need to go do something about it. That means you probably need, not probably, it means you need to have the courage to take her aside and say, we're done. We're not doing this anymore. You're not allowed to do this anymore. And because I love you, I don't want you to be this kind of old lady. I don't want you to be a bitter old lady. You need to stop. Here's some examples. Here's the name the Bible gives to the sin. Okay, we ready to repent of it? And okay, I'm going to help you hold you accountable to that. Galatians 6:1. See our season on peacemaking. If anyone's caught in a trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, keeping watch on yourself lest you be tempted. And so a husband absolutely needs to overcome his fear and his trepidation and go exercise some godly rule in his home. Mm-hmm. And he needs to put a stop to things early because they will run away.
Yeah.
And they will calcify.
Oh, yuck.
And there are many, many homes who are fraught because the husband hasn't had the courage to lead. You know, this comes moving outside of just the wife, the husband's vocation again. Where do you need courage? Well, how many homes are fraught because the husband doesn't have the courage to lead his family into green pastures, to go get the better job, to where he's not active, he's not the courageous center of his home, he's not thinking about what do I need to do to build this thing into productivity and fruitfulness and flowering, and maybe there are some hard calls that come with this. Maybe it's a move, maybe it's a career change, maybe it's a church switch, maybe like those are all really difficult things where the status quo requires very little courage. Just maintaining what you're already doing is not something that usually requires that much courage. But to actually say like, wow, I'm responsible for these people. they're not doing well, or they're not doing as well as I think they should be. What's the problem? Let me go and exercise some godly kingship or rule in that area. Make a tough call for my family's good. Make the tough call about the extended family member that is being wreaking havoc in the home, and picking up the phone and calling the father-in-law, or picking up the phone and calling mom and saying, you can't talk to my wife, you can't talk to your daughter-in-law that way. I can think of situations where godly men that I know have had to have many conversations like that, and say, pick up the phone and say, look, hey, Thanksgiving, that didn't go well, to mom and dad, and honor them and be respectful, but say that stops. You can't talk to my wife that way, or we won't permit that. That's really tough for a husband to do.
Yeah.
Really tough. Because most of the time he wants to be like, honey, go, like that's the flesh is going to be like, honey, go deal with that.
Yeah.
Oh, you had a problem? I didn't notice.
You didn't hear the plates being thrown across the floor?
What? People just have, I think she was just having a bad day. It's like, no.
Well, it can suck because it usually in those circumstances, that person who sinned against someone else is somebody else's responsibility. So you've talked about this before with other people, is that a man's lack of being responsible. So maybe grandpa's not responsible for grandma's emotional state very well like he should be.
Right.
That responsibility doesn't disappear. It just now gets shoved on the kid's shoulders.
Yeah, it passes downstream.
Yeah, so that's part of why it's awkward too, is just like, well, this really isn't my authoritative place to be making this call, but now I have to step into this.
Yeah, it's like the private who's the captain in the unit is failing and deserts, and then the private's got to be like, yeah, but we're still on the battlefield. We got to do the mission still. Like, you can't just...
Yeah.
It sucks, but you have to push forward. So I think those are some obvious ones where courage is required. What about, let's leave it here with what happens to Christian culture if we allow cowardice to take root. What kind of homes and churches are we going to see if this virtue is not established?
I think as I was listening to you talk, I was just thinking about when you were talking about the status quo, I was thinking about how much laziness is involved in this.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about what I know about neuroscience and just how like our brain making new connections is a really hard thing for our brain to do. Like God designed it that way, but it takes X amount of repetitive acts and doing the same thing for a synapse to finally get there. And so you have, I think a lot of it is like lazy thinking leads to lazy lives, leads to like, I don't know. I'm just laziness is what's been coming to mind as I've been listening to you talk.
Yeah, I think that you will get quite like in a culture of laziness, you will get cowardice. And in a culture of cowardice, you will get laziness. They each fear the other because cowardice looks at a hard thing or a fearful thing and it says, I'm not going to go do that.
Yeah.
That's too hard. It's probably not going to work anyway. It's just going to be painful. I'm not going to persevere through that.
I'm going to sit on my talent. I'm going to bury it.
And what happens to problems when you ignore them?
Ugh.
They get bigger. It's easier to weed a garden when they're little. It takes a lot more resolve and courage to go say no. What could have been an hour of light weeding is now 3 straight days of back-breaking labor. What could have been solved in the first 6 months of marriage, we're now 5 years in. It's going to take a couple months of perseverance through some hard sledding before. It's a different kind of courage, and that's why I would say that how can men and women pursue courage and repent of cowardice? Well, the only way to do it is to stop where you are, to take a stand right there and turn around. You can't wait until it's manageable. When you're not courageous, it gets like think about our whole culture. What happens when cowardice sets in? Well, then the wicked flee when no one pursues. But the righteous are bold as a lion. Proverbs 28. You just keep giving way and giving way and giving way, and then you turn around and you say, "Oh, they're transing kids." Like that's what happens when Christians aren't courageous. So that's what happens in your home when you say, oh, little Johnny was, he lied and he's real nasty and snotty. But you know what? A spanking would be too hard. You turn around and he's 14 and all of a sudden he's vandalizing the local, I don't know, public school, and he's, knocking up the junior high kids. And you're like, this is going to be a lot harder to deal with now.
Ugh.
But it's still going to require you to turn around and actually say, well, how do I repent of this? I do it right now.
Yeah, either do it now when it's easier or later when it's way harder.
It will keep snowballing. You've got to turn. You've got to be courageous. And so I would say you do need to meditate. When they're relational things, you need to meditate on Galatians 6:1. Get really clear on the gospel and peacemaking. You need to get really clear on how to be humble and meek and also bold and courageous so that there can be kindness and courage together. When you're needing to exercise relational courage within your household, you're not going to come in as a tyrant. But you are going to feel like you're being too strong if you've been cowardly and lazy for a long time.
Yeah, that's interesting to note.
You need to have both of those. When it's courage outward facing, you just have to be willing to be disliked, be willing to be hated. This is Jesus 101.
What?
Right?
Really?
People are going to hate you. If they hated me, they're definitely going to hate you. So just basically grow a pair.
I think it's important to remember, too, that it's not like the sternness of your look that's going to convince your wife and children.
Right.
It's not your...
It's the kindness of God that leads us to
anger.
repentance. It's going to be a bold, cheerful courage. And it
literally
takes
cheerful, you guys. It's going to be more persuasive, husbands, if you're cheerful
absolutely.
about it. It just is.
And same for wives. It's going to be a lot more persuasive
that's true.
if there's an issue in the home. If you have the tenor that you are a person who is willing to forgive sin, overlook an offense, and rebuild fellowship where there's been a breach. This is true with children as well. It can't be all steel. It has to be heart too, right? They have to know that when we're talking about within the covenant, the family, the church, there's steel, but there's also heart. When it comes to facing down the hordes of hell, it's sharp steel, sharp arrows. That's what it is. And that's straighten your back, be Christ-like and courageous and willing to die. Any final thoughts here as we close out this episode?
I don't think so. No final thoughts.
Excellent. Well, thanks for listening, guys. If you like the work we do here at Bright Hearth and you'd like to help support this work here as well as what we do at New Christendom Press, then become a patron. That's a great way to support this show. Chip in, anything from like the cost of a cup of coffee at Starbucks or somewhere better than Starbucks, preferably, and up. You can do that at patreon.com/brighthearth. And we do a special patron-only show called In the Kitchen. It's usually short and quick and very practical. There are most weeks that we'd encourage you to sign up, support the show, check out. But thanks for listening, guys. We hope the Lord blesses you, that he builds up your courage and he builds that muscle in your home and richly blesses you in Christ. And we'll see you next time.